Good morning. Okay, so let's begin today's class. I think it's already, just 2 minutes to start, but okay. How many of you are online right now?
Sir, 2 of us are.
Okay, let's just wait for 2 more minutes, Just a minute, actually. Okay, so do you guys have any queries from the last class? Any queries? I'm addressing you guys only right now because the classroom students are yet to arrive.
Sir, I had a query regarding constitution and jurisprudence as an optional.
Okay, yes.
What happens with projects is that people often tend to choose transfer of property because constitution and jurisprudence is not that marked issue. That paper goes is like 100 or something. So,
Which is not a bad score, right? Even in the...
no, that's good, but that is the highest. The average, general average is very low. So, that is why.
Yes, there are people who end up scoring 13, 20, 25 like that in Constitution. I understand that. But see, I will not say anything for or against. I'll just tell you my experience with it. I chose Constitution and Jurisprudence as an optional. Now, the reason why I chose that is, if you notice the pattern of the last few years' papers, right? Very selected concepts are being tested. Like for instance, in jurisprudence, you will notice that one question from ownership and possession is guaranteed, for sure. Right? Either you will get that in the form of that question called 9 points in law. Possession is 9 points in law of ownership. Or some other paraphrasing of the same concept, but you will definitely get a question from that. Secondly, you will get a question from either from historical school of law, sociological school, or positivism. It's either of these three. It's never been beyond that. Sometimes, of course, in 2016 I remember Kelsen, pure theory of law, was tested. If you look at all these concepts, right, all you have to do is you have to just make proper notes. The risk that is there with property law and all of the other subjects is that you might get some problem questions also. I'm not saying that it's not something that can't be done, but conceptually speaking, the number of things that you have to cover in property law are a lot more, right? Because you have to cover transfer of property, you have to cover limitation act, and you have to cover specific relief act as well. So when you consider the fact that it is 3 topics versus just 2 in this, and even in these 2 you are not getting beyond a few selected questions, I would say going for Constitution jurisprudence is not risky, provided that you have a good provided that you have a memory for long form answers. Because for instance, the topic that we'll be dealing with today, state, right? So in state, if you get a long question, it is necessary for you to remember 7 to 8 cases and their details. So if you are dealing with questions of that nature and you're not comfortable with it, then Constitution and Jurisprudence as an optional is not something I would suggest to you. Because in transfer of property, you are not going to necessarily have to depend on case laws a lot. You'll mostly be restricted to concepts. So it depends on your choice. I'm not going to compel you on anything, but in terms of the amount of matter that you have to cover, Constitution and Jurisprudence is not much. It looks like it's a lot, but it's not much.
Yes, sir. Even I saw the past because the topics are very limited because people
Precisely.
are not asking questions.
Yes.
Jurisprudence, what I wanted to ask is that whether we need to mention case laws even in jurisprudence.
Jurisprudence, only in one specific topic you will have to mention case laws if it's not even necessary, but it's good to mention in possession and ownership. In all the others you don't have to mention. For instance, in possession and ownership, the two elements of possession, animus possidendi and corpus possessionis, whether these two elements are present or not, you have to illustrate it through first of all that case Bridges versus Hawksworth, where he drops a wad of notes in the shop, and whether the shopkeeper has possession over it or not is the question. So in those kind of things you'll have to mention maybe 4-5 cases. Otherwise jurisprudence requires you to mention no cases at all. Absolutely not. Okay, any more questions? Any more conceptual queries from the last class, introduction? Okay, so let's begin with, or rather let's proceed with an elaboration of the concept of state, as we had done the last time. Okay, the last time I think I had given you a small introductory paragraph, right? Can one of you read it out for me? For Article 12.
For other authorities, sir?
Yes. Just that ending part of Article 12, that interpretation of other authorities.
So it is written, India is a welfare state or constitution is found on welfare state. The government functions through its many departments and also other government companies and registered societies. To give narrow interpretation to the phrase of other authorities, it will take many such organizations out of the preview of the fundamental rights and other constitutional limitations. Hence, the article given the expanded interpretation of the phrase other authorities, which also mean the instrumentary of the state.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. All right. So let me begin with first noting down a small chart that I want you to remember. And if you mention this diagram, it will be helpful in the exam also. Okay. So this is a classification of what we normally refer to as state, right? Broadly speaking, state or government as we say it can either function through, like I mentioned in the paragraph, departmental bodies or autonomous bodies. Okay, what do we mean by departmental bodies? Quite obviously and quite simply stated, a government department, right? For instance, when it comes to the, let's say the state government, the fisheries department or the agriculture department, okay, these are different departments that function and they are obviously going to be considered as state because they have governmental functions and essentially they constitute the government or an organ of the government. This other part that you're seeing over here, autonomous bodies. What do you mean by autonomy? What is the meaning of this? Autonomous is the word, the root word is autonomy, right? So what do you mean by autonomy? Any answers? Can you repeat that, please?
So autonomous means which are independent.
Very good. Which are independent in their functioning, right? Now, over here, autonomous bodies can also be divided into two things. Statutory bodies and non-statutory bodies. Okay. Please note this particular hierarchy down. state can function because, like I said, the very premise of what I'm saying is that India is a welfare state, right? Being a welfare state, it has to carry out multiple functions which it may not be able to carry out, only through the arm of departmental bodies. Because it cannot carry out only through the arm of departmental bodies, it can carry them out through also autonomous bodies. Now, these autonomous bodies can either be statutory or non-statutory. What do we mean by statutory? That a particular body has been established by the method of legislation. You can note this down. A statutory body is any body that is established by the method of legislation. And a non-statutory body is anything that can either be, or mostly it is a registered body. Okay? An example of a statutory body, and this is directly related to one of the cases, Sukhdev versus Bhagat Ram, that we'll be discussing, is your LIC. LIC has been established under an act of the parliament, and also ONGC. Okay? Now, when I'm saying non-statutory body would mean a registered body. Yes. I will be discussing that case, so you don't have to write that down for now. Just write down the names of these bodies. I'll be talking about that case very soon. That's Sukhdev versus Bhagat Ram, if you want to mention it, but I'll be repeating it again in much detail. Yes, I'm coming to that. A non-statutory body is something that is not established by a specific statute, okay? Your LIC is established under the Life Insurance Corporation Act. It's a specific law that has established it. But your non-statutory body is something that is not established under a specific act, but it is something that would probably be a registered body, okay? Now, an example of a registered body could be something that is registered under your Companies Act. Any government company may be registered under a Companies Act, or your Societies Registration Act. Okay, Companies Act or Societies Registration Act. A few examples of this would be your CSIR, Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, or your Indian Council for Agricultural Research. Okay? All right. So any confusion with regard to this particular framework that I've given you over here? You don't have to mention this in the exam. You don't have to write down this hierarchy, but if you can explain this, then a diagram would look better. That's all that there is. Okay, any confusion with regard to this framework?
So this lower part is not visible.
The lower part?
Autonomous part is
yes, this non-statutory, this is registered body. Okay, and registered body It can be registered under your Companies Act or your Societies Registration Act. These are the two examples that have been given.
Sir, can you repeat the classification under non-statutory?
Okay, yes. Under non-statutory, a non-statutory body can be a registered body. Okay? Now, a registered body can either be under your Companies Act or under Societies Registration Act. Cooperative Societies Act is also there, but you just have to remember these two. Let's not, unnecessarily complicate the situation. Companies Act, Societies Registration Act. Okay, all right. Has everyone noted this down?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, let's proceed with the discussion of the case laws under this, okay? Is it okay if I wipe this out?
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Okay. So, the first case law that we'll be dealing with is your, you write this down here, Rajasthan State Electricity Board versus Mohanlal. Please note this down. Rajasthan State Electricity Board versus Mohanlal. My handwriting isn't exactly a work of art, so please forgive me for that. If you cannot see it properly, then you can ask me, I'll read it out to you. It's not the best of handwritings that are available. Okay. Rajasthan State Electricity Board versus Mohanlal. Does anyone know anything about this case which you might have studied in law school? Any responses? Okay, you can, yeah. All right. Okay, so the facts of this case were like this. The State Electricity Board was established under the Electricity Supply Act, okay? Now, according to that law, the State Electricity Board was also carrying out certain commercial functions. So the question before the court was, if this body is carrying out commercial functions, can it be referred to as state? Alright, so in this case the court followed the reasoning that yes, it will be referred to as state because under your, this is, you can check this out from the Bare Act itself, Article 198 of the, 298 of the Constitution. The state can carry out trade and commerce activities, okay, commercial activities basically. And because it can carry out such commercial activities under the garb of government, it will be referred to as state. So just to note down a few points, just write down. The State Electricity Board was established under the Electricity Supply Act. was established under the Electricity Supply Act, and the board was carrying out certain commercial functions. So the question was, whether the body can be regarded to be state. The court answered in the affirmative, or you can simply... can you repeat that, please?
Whether the body...
The question was whether the body can be regarded to be state, or can be regarded as state. And when you write state in any part of this question, any part of this particular part, make sure that it's within inverted commas. Okay.
Answer.
Yes?
Sir, after state over need to do something.
The court answered that.
Yes, the court answered in the affirmative. That means the court answered yes, it is state. Or you can just simply write, the court answered that it is indeed state, because according to Article 298, the state can carry out trade and commercial activities. Okay? Alright, so the next case law under this, very straightforward and simple. Sukhdev versus Bhagat Ram. Sukhdev versus Bhagat Ram. And please remember, you don't need to write the citations in the exam. No one's expecting you to remember all the details of which particular volume of the AIR these judgments were reported in. So the basic question in this case was whether three bodies, in this case being I've given you these examples before, the names LIC, your ONGC and Finance Corporation, IFC. LIC, ONGC and IFC, whether these statutory bodies can be regarded to be state. Please remember that at this particular point of time in the legal development of this concept, we have not come yet to the part where it says an instrumentality of the state can be regarded to be state itself. All we are dealing with it, first over here, government body, almost you could say a government department carrying out commercial functions can be held to be state. Second case, almost similarly, statutory body discharging public functions established under a very specific law can be regarded to be state. Okay, over here we are not yet saying that a non-statutory body can also be subjected to the rigors of fundamental rights. Okay, or can be called to be state. However, there is a very specific observation that was made in this case. Okay, let me read that out to you. You can note this down if you want. The reason for adopting such a broad view of Article 12 is that Constitution should, whenever possible, be so construed as to apply to the arbitrary application of power. I'm writing this phrase down over here. Constitution is all about having phrases like this in your answer. It's not a complicated topic at all. Arbitrary application of power. Is everyone following me at this point?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The Constitution should whenever be so construed as to apply to arbitrary application of power against individuals by centers of power. Okay, please just try to understand this, just this statement in a logical manner. Yes?
Sir, it is not feasible.
Okay, let me, I think the,
So you can wipe the all the scales down, sir.
you've written this down? Okay.
Yes, sir.
This part isn't visible, huh? Okay, let me write this down again. Arbitrary application of power against individuals by centers of power. Okay, over here I want you to just look very specifically at number one, arbitrary application of power against individuals by centers of power. Okay, please take a look at this statement. This will clarify how this concept is being developed by the court. What do we mean by arbitrary application of power? This, by the way, this particular statement is from Sukhdev versus Bhagat Ram. So you can note this down under that case law itself. This is the juridical thinking that led to instrumentalities of state. What do you mean by arbitrary application of power? What do you mean by arbitrary? Anyone? What do you mean by arbitrary?
Sir, unjust.
Unjust, yes. More specifically, yes, can you repeat that?
Personal gains.
Without any reason or justification. Very good. Both without any reason or justification leading to an unjust result. Fundamentally it is that, right? So any action that is without any reason or justification, okay, leading to an unjust result by the use of power. What do we mean by power over here? If you remember, and I'm taking a small detour over here. You just need to know, you don't have to know this in detail for writing in the answer, but just to think logically. What do we mean by power? Power means ability to alter legal relations of another. If you might remember, this is the definition of power that is given by Hoffeld, okay? In Hoffeld's definition of, that analysis where he divides claims, liberties, powers and immunities. So, unreasonable application of power being the ability to alter the legal relations of another. Now, against individuals by centers of power. What do we mean by centers of power over here? We mean, good morning. What do we mean by centers of power over here? Anyone? It is either the executive or the legislature as per Article 12, isn't it? Am I audible to all?
Yes, sir.
Is this getting confusing? You can stop me and ask me questions. There's no problem. This is just a small statement to indicate what the content of, the next few lines are going to be, nothing else. Over here we are expanding the definition of state in terms of other authorities to mean all of this, to include all the other authorities, so that this general thing that is given over here, okay, individuals will not be unjustly treated. Centers of power over here means either your executive or your legislature, right? Is this much clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you have any confusions with you don't have to write this particular thing down, ability to alter legal relations. All I've given this here for is just to give you an idea of what I'm trying to say over here. When the state is making a law, okay, or it is doing some executive action, in this specific situation, what is it doing? It is altering the legal relations between people, or it is altering the legal status of specific individuals. Okay? A very small and relevant example of that would be your Citizenship Amendment Bill, right? Let us say that is ultimately, enacted into a law and it's still under, what do you call it? It's reserved in the Supreme Court till now. But ultimately when it is confirmed, do you realize that the impact of that law would be to render many people as non-citizens of this country, right? So do you realize that being a citizen is nothing else but certain legal relations? The ability to alter that legal relation is vested in a center of power. This center of power being your legislature and the executive. Okay, so Sukhdev versus Bhagat Ram, you can write the name of the case down. This is the observation that was made in that case.
Case name?
Yeah,
Case.
Sukhdev versus Bhagat Ram. You can write down one more statement from that particular case. The emerging principle appears to be that a public corporation being a creation of the state, that a public corporation being a creation of the state is subject to the same same constitutional limitations. To the same constitutional limitations as the state itself. Okay, has everyone noted this statement down?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
This statement is fairly simple to understand. There is nothing difficult in this, right? See, when you are writing, first of all, when you go through these lines, you will understand the concept, right? Secondly, if your answer reflects these statements, and remember, I'm not saying that your answer has to reflect these statements verbatim. It does not have to be the exact same reproduction of this statement. All you have to know is the basic concept behind it. First point, arbitrary application of power against individuals by centers of power. To avoid this, we are expanding the ambit of the meaning of state. Okay? After that, you can just mention that a public corporation is a creation of the state itself. Because it is a creation of the state itself, it will be subject to the same constitutional limitations, right? And in this case, Sukhdev versus Bhagat Ram, LIC, ONGC and IFC were regarded as being creations of the state itself, public corporations, and hence they are subject to the same constitutional limitations. Clear? Okay. Let's go to the next case law. Is it okay if I wipe this off?
Yes, sir.
Everyone?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Please feel free to stop me at any point that you do not understand any of these concepts. Do not hesitate, because we are just starting to learn these concepts, right? And there's no point in being shy. When you have a question, it's always better to clear out. All right. The next case is R.D. Shetty versus International Airport Authority. R.D. Shetty versus International Airport Authority of India. I'm just writing this down in short. You can write down the full name. International Airport Authority of India. Okay, so in this case, the International Airport Authority of India has been established under a statute, okay, under a law. Now, the case that was filed against this particular body was to do with enforcement of Article 14. You can write this down. The IAAI, don't use abbreviations in the answer, but just for the notes. Was a creation of a statute. The case was related to the enforcement of this is a statutory body, enforcement of Article 14. It is in this case that your This is the name of that concept that you'll be getting in question. Instrumentality of the state. Instrumentality or agency of the state. So the court said that because this is a statutory body and several other tests were there which were again reiterated in the very second case after this that I'll be discussing, but primarily because it is a statutory body and because it is an instrumentality or agency of the state, Article 14 can be enforced against it. If you note the pattern in the three cases that I have mentioned, the first case being your Rajasthan State Electricity Board versus Mohanlal, in which the Electricity Board is a body that has been established under the Electricity Supply Act, okay? That is a statutory body. In Sukhdev versus Bhagatram as well, the LIC, ONGC and IFC are statutory bodies, right? But in both these cases, if you notice, there is no mention of instrumentality or agency of state. All we were dealing with there is the very fundamental principles that the two fundamental principles I've mentioned there. Arbitrary application of power by against individuals by centers of power, right? And the fact that a public corporation is a creation of the state, because it is a creation of the state, it's the child of the state, it is the state itself, limitations will apply accordingly. In this, however, a general principle has been laid down, which is known as your instrumentality or agency of the state. Okay? Now, if you notice, the language that is being used over here is very much, how should I say, connected or reminiscent of that last statement I gave you, where it's mentioned that the public corporation is a creation of the state, right? So, this is how the reasoning is being developed. Is everybody clear with this case law?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you all written this down?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's proceed further then. The next case. The next case is your Sabhajit Tiwari versus Union of India. Okay, here. Sabhajit Tiwari versus Union of India. Quickly, I'll tell you the facts of this case, okay, because this case will ultimately be overruled by the last case that we'll be discussing, Pradeep Kumar Biswas. In 1972, a junior stenographer you can write these facts. It's not necessary for you to mention the facts, only the principle, but just for your reference, junior stenographer at CSIR demanded equal remuneration with other newly appointed stenographers. Junior stenographer at CSIR demanded equal remuneration with other newly appointed stenographers. Okay. Now, imagine that you're the judge in this case. Imagine that you're the judge in this case. You have to decide whether a particular right that this stenographer has can be enforced against this body, right? What did I tell you the earliest? What are the earlier principles that we have in mind? Arbitrary application of power by centers of power against individuals, right? Who is the individual? The individual is the junior stenographer here. Okay? Which is the body we are talking about? CSIR. Now, for our principle to apply, CSIR has to be an instrumentality of the state. Okay? But to answer this question, we need to know the nature of CSIR as a body, right? Is everyone following me till now? Okay. We need to know the nature of CSIR as a body. So as it turns out, CSIR is a non-statutory body. Non-statutory body registered under Societies Registration Act. Non-statutory body registered under Societies Registration Act. Now, an interesting thing over here is that as a government body or as a autonomous body, so to speak, it is funded by government. But see, this much should give you a feeling that in terms of justice, the junior stenographer should get remuneration. The right can be enforced against CSIR, right? This is not what was done.
It was funded by the government.
It was funded by the government, but the thinking at that point of time was that it has to be, first of all, a statutory body. It has to be a creation of a statute, right? But in this case, it is not a creation of the statute. Is everyone clear what I'm saying over here?
Yes.
It is not a, mind you, it is not a creation of a statute, even if it is funded by government. Even if it might be, discharging functions that are governmental in nature, it is not a statutory body, which is what the thinking was at that point of time. But remember, and I'm just mentioning this over here so that, you don't get worried about this case being unjust. This was overruled by, you can note this down, Pradeep Kumar Biswas versus Indian Institute of Chemical Biology. Okay, so the thinking that is involved in this case is from 1972. Pradeep Kumar Biswas happened much later, 15 to 20 to 30 years later. Okay, so there must have been something that led to the change of thinking from this case to this particular case, right? So that change, has everyone written this down? Written it down?
Yes, sir.
All right, let me wipe this off. The change of thinking, please note down Som Prakash Rekhi versus Union of India. Som Prakash Rekhi versus Union of India. I think this was around 1976. Okay, so what happened in this case was Earlier at that point of time, there used to be a company known as Burma Shell. You can note this down. It's good to know the facts of these important cases. Burma Shell. Okay, this was basically a oil drilling company. Right? This company was acquired by central government. Okay? Under the name of the law is Burma Shell Acquisition of Undertaking Act, but you don't have to remember that. You can just mention by Act of Parliament. Okay? Burma Shell oil drilling company acquired by central government through an Act of Parliament. Okay? And then control is vested, or rather the control is transferred to another company, and everyone knows the name of this company. This is Bharat Petroleum. Okay? Now, again, the court was faced with a question: is this particular organization state? Is Bharat Petroleum state or not? Right? To answer this question, let's try to think along the same principles. Is Bharat Petroleum a statutory body?
It's adopted with an act.
It is. You're partly correct. You're in fact partly correct, because Burma Shell has been acquired by Act of Parliament. Okay? So that means Bharat Petroleum, we can say, is first of all partly statutory. Why? Because in fact it is also a government company, right? It's a government company that is registered under section, this is the old Companies Act, section 617 of Companies Act. Is this visible to all of you?
No, sir.
Okay, I think I went to the extreme right. Till which part? Can you see the part till Bharat Petroleum?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so please write down, Bharat Petroleum is a partly statutory company and partly non-statutory. Okay? Now, this is a very unique situation, because all the cases that we have seen before this, either the company or either the body has been fully statutory or it has been non-statutory. Hence, we have had a clear-cut answer. But over here, this is not the case. It's partly statutory and partly a government company. In this case, however, the court interestingly said that this will be state. Why? Note this phrase down. Because of number one, acquisition by government, and number two, brooding presence of central government. Is this visible?
So second point,
Yes, the second point is brooding presence of central government. What do you mean by brooding presence? An amount of extensive control. This phrase means extensive control. Any doubts from this case?
No, sir.
Are you clear with the concept? Are you clear with how we are developing the concept over here? In Sabhajit Tiwari, the question was whether a non-statutory body can be a state or not. Here we are dealt with the question whether a partly statutory, partly non-statutory body can be a state. So do you see there is a change in thinking? In the last case, it was clearly declared it's not a state. But over here it is being said that it is in fact a state. Right? We can also say that this is borrowing from the observations in Sukhdev versus Bhagat Ram. In Sukhdev versus Bhagat Ram, it was mentioned that a public corporation is a creation of the government itself and hence it can be subject to the same limitations. Clear? Okay. Should we proceed to the next case?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm guessing you all have written this down, so I'm wiping this off.
Yes, sir.
Now this next case that we are going to deal with, this is very interesting because this is a case that will help you understand the concept entirely. Okay? This is Ajay Hasya versus Khalid Mujib. Ajay Hasya versus Khalid Mujib. The main question in this case was with regard to something known as the REC or Regional Engineering College, okay, in Jammu and Kashmir. You see, the interesting thing about this case is that this is diametrically opposite to Sabhajit Tiwari in terms of facts and reasoning. Not in terms of facts, sorry, in terms of reasoning. It so happens that this particular institution that we are talking about, you might have already guessed, has been established and registered as a society, okay, under Societies Registration Act. It also so happens the center and state provide funding state can supervise administration